The first time I saw him on the cameras, the patient died 5 minutes later. He wasn't running. He wasn't panicking. He just stood at the bedside in his plain white coat, one hand resting lightly on the patient's chest, while the heart monitor went from normal rhythm to a flat, endless tone. Everyone else was rushing. The nurse, the tech, the crash cart. He was the only one who looked calm, almost bored, as if he'd seen this exact moment 100 times. When they finally burst into the room on the feed, he was gone. No one mentioned him. No one asked who the extra doctor was. And when I checked the access logs for that floor at that time, the system said something impossible. No one had entered or left the ward for the last 30 minutes. My name is Daniel. I work night security at a private psychiatric clinic just outside the city limits. People imagine it like a movie asylum, but it's mostly long corridors, locked doors, and the kind of silence that feels heavier after midnight. We don't take walk-ins. No ER, no trauma bay. By the time someone gets here, they've already been through other hospitals, evaluations, signatures, and the kind of family meetings no one wants to remember. My base is a small monitoring room at the end of the service corridor. 6 old monitors on a metal rack, each split into multiple camera feeds. Parking lot, main entrance, side gate, elevators, and the psychiatric wards A, B, and C. There's a constant low hum in that room. The fans, the fluorescent light, the buzz of the old switchboard. You sit there long enough and you start to recognize every flicker on the screen, every reflection in the glass, every nurse's posture just by their silhouette. Nights blur together. Most of my shift is routine, checking doors, logging rounds, watching the feeds while fighting sleep and caffeine headaches. The staff on nights is a skeleton crew. 1 psychiatrist on call, a few nurses, 1 or 2 psych techs, and whoever's unlucky enough to be the on-duty administrator. I know them all. I know their faces, their habits, the way they walk when they're tired versus when they're scared. That's why the night I saw that man in the white coat for the first time, I knew immediately he didn't belong. Not to this shift, not to any shift I had ever worked. It was around 2:55 when it started. I was staring at the clock, thinking about making another terrible coffee, when camera 4, the corridor towards C, our high-dependency psych unit, flickered. Just a burst of static, like a glitch. It cleared in less than a second, and suddenly, he was there, mid-frame, walking calmly down the hall. Male, maybe early 40s, hair short and dark, white lab coat buttoned up, ID badge on a retractable cord clipped to his chest. Not a visitor. Visitors don't get that kind of badge. Not cleaning staff, they wear blue. And yet, I had never seen his face before. He walked with that relaxed, unhurried pace you only see during daytime rounds. Head slightly tilted, as if listening at each door as he passed, like he already knew who he was going to stop for. I remember frowning and leaning closer to the screen, tracing the logo on his badge with my eyes. Same clinic logo, same color lanyard. It looked real, too real to be a joke. I picked up the internal phone and called the nurse station on Ward C. "Ward C, night station," I said. "This is security. Are you expecting a doctor or volunteer to come up? Male, white coat, just entered your hall?" There was a pause. Then, "No one's scheduled. Access door hasn't buzzed. Cameras see anyone coming up the stairs?" I glanced at the feeds. Stairwell, empty. Service elevator, empty. Side access, locked, green light solid. On camera 4, the man in the white coat stopped at the door of room C07. He stood perfectly still for a moment, looking through the small window, then reached for the handle and went inside like he owned the place. I watched him disappear into C07 and switched to the interior camera for that room. The image was dim, mostly the outline of the patient in bed and the soft glow of the monitor beside him. For a few seconds, nothing changed. The man in the lab coat was just a pale shape near the edge of the frame, standing too close to the patient's head for me to see his face clearly. Then the camera glitched. The screen smeared into gray noise, then froze, then jumped forward like a skipped frame on an old tape. When the picture came back, he was at the bedside, closer now. His hand rested lightly on the patient's chest, fingers spread as if feeling a heartbeat that wasn't his. I remember thinking it looked gentle, not clinical, not rushed, more like someone comforting a child in the dark. The monitor showed a normal rhythm. Beep, beep, beep. Perfect little hills on the screen. I reached for the phone again, but before I could dial, the line on the monitor dipped. The beeps slowed. Then they started to space out in a way that made my stomach drop. The alarm triggered a second later. The long, sharp tone of bradycardia cut through the quiet, and I reflexively checked my panel. Ward C, room 07, code blue beacon flashing. On the camera, the man in the coat stepped back from the bed. He didn't look at the patient. He turned his head and looked directly into the lens. I felt something cold slide down my spine. His expression wasn't surprised or afraid. It was calm, detached, like he'd just finished signing off on a discharge form. The door burst open behind him. The nurse and psych tech rushed in, pushing the crash cart into the room. They moved straight to the bed, shouting orders, hands flying over the patient. No one looked at him. No one bumped into him. They moved as if he wasn't there at all. I grabbed the phone with a shaking hand and called the nurse station again. "Who's in the room with you?" I asked, my voice too loud. "Just me and the tech," she said, breathing hard. I could hear the chaos in the background. "We're coding C07. Call the on-call doc and the supervisor, now." I stared at the screen. The man in the coat stood at the foot of the bed, almost in the blind spot of the overhead light. His badge glinted once, catching the reflection from the monitor. And then the video flickered again. For a split second, the frame tore in half with static, and he was gone. One frame? There. Next frame. Nothing but the staff and the patient. I rewound the feed by a few seconds, watching it 3 times. Each time, he vanished in the same torn frame, like the camera had simply chosen not to show that moment. By the time I called the psychiatrist on duty and the night supervisor, the code had already been running for several minutes. From the cameras, I watched the rhythm never come back. The patient in C07 was pronounced dead at 039 hours. Officially, it was logged as sudden cardiac event, unexpected. On paper, it was just an unfortunate night. I stayed in the monitoring room after the team cleared out, the lights buzzing overhead, the smell of burnt coffee in the air. The screen showed only the usual images again: empty corridors, a nurse charting, a tech leaning against a wall, exhausted. I couldn't stop replaying the footage. The corridor, the door, the hand on the chest, the look into the camera. When things finally quieted down, I opened the access control software and pulled up the logs for Ward C around 2:55. The system tracks every badge scan, every door opened. The list for that time window was short: the nurse, the psych tech, the psychiatrist, and one more. ID type, volunteer access, name, night support, clinical volunteer. Badge number 73104. The entry timestamp was the exact minute the man first appeared on the hallway camera. We don't use volunteers on nights. We barely use them during the day. I scrolled up and down through older logs. The same volunteer ID appeared a few times over the last 6 months, always between 2:30 and 3:30 a.m., always tied to high dependency rooms. In 3 of those entries, the patients assigned to those rooms had died within the same night. I printed the log before the system could time out, the old thermal printer groaning as it spat out the thin strip of paper. The volunteer entry sat there in faded black letters, looking harmless. Night support, clinical volunteer. Badge number, 73104. The next night, I brought it up at the start of shift briefing. We do those in a cramped office near the main entrance. Fluorescent light, whiteboard with staffing notes, people half awake and barely listening. I waited until the supervisor finished talking about census and an upcoming inspection. Then I cleared my throat. Who approved night volunteers for the psych wards? I asked, holding up the strip of paper. Because this says we've had one coming in around 3 in the morning. The charge nurse frowned. We don't have night volunteers, she said. Not allowed. Liability issues. The psychiatrist on call looked up from his tablet, annoyed. Is this about last night's code? Because if this is your way of saying security thinks we missed something, I shook my head. I'm saying the system logged a volunteer with badge 73104 entering Ward C at the exact minute before the patient in CO7 coded. I saw someone on the cameras. White coat, male, early 40s. There was a brief silence. The supervisor rubbed her temples. Send me the log, she said. We'll have admin check tomorrow. Probably a misconfigured badge from day program or something. Her tone said the conversation was over. The others drifted back to their routines, the code already turning into something to forget. But I couldn't forget. Not when I had watched that man's hand on the patient's chest. Not when his calm eyes had met the camera while the heart went flat. After the briefing, I detoured to the HR office before heading to the monitoring room. It was dark, closed for the night, but I had access to the internal directory. I sat at a side desk, logged in, and searched by badge number, 73104. The system thought about it for a long time. Then a profile appeared, framed in a red banner at the top that I hadn't seen before. Status, inactive, do not reissue. Role, psychiatric resident, clinical volunteer. Name, Dr. Elias Morrow. Notes, record archived, accident on premises, see incident file 1013. The profile photo was black and white, low resolution, but the face was unmistakable. Dark hair, calm expression, same age, same eyes that had stared into my camera at 0300. The date on the incident file was 10 years ago. I tried to open the linked file, but the system flashed a small window. Access restricted. Administrative level only. Back in the monitoring room, the humming of the screens felt different. I closed the door behind me and locked it, even though I didn't need to. I pulled up the footage from the previous months, filtering for every time that badge number had pinged an access point. Each time, the pattern repeated. Entry between 2:30 and 3:30, high dependency or closed-door psychiatric rooms. Within hours, a patient death, sometimes clearly expected, sometimes labeled unexpected decline. The camera footage told a quiet, consistent story. A white coat entering, a hand on a chest, a gentle posture by the bedside, the same calm face, the same unhurried steps in every corridor. Around 2:40 that night, while I was still scrubbing through files, camera 3 chimed softly. Motion detected. Lower psych hallway, Ward B. I switched to the live feed. He
was there. Same coat, same badge. Walking down the hall of Ward B as if he'd never missed a shift. This time there was no glitch. He came into frame cleanly, no static, no smear. The system tagged him with a yellow box for motion tracking, as if he were just another normal body moving through space. My heart slammed against my ribs. I hit the intercom button for Ward B, but my finger hovered over it. Last time no one had seen him. Last time no one had reacted. On the screen he passed room B03, then B05, head slightly tilted, listening. He stopped at B09. I pulled up the patient census list with my free hand. B09, female, 19, severe anxiety with self-harm, on watch, medically stable. He stood at the door for a moment. Then, just like before, he reached for the handle. The intercom button felt heavy under my fingertip. If I alerted them and he was nobody again, I'd just become the paranoid security guard seeing ghosts on the cameras. Instead, I did something I'm still not sure I can explain. I grabbed my keys, clipped my radio to my belt, and left the monitoring room. If the cameras could see him, but people couldn't, I needed to find out which one of us I was.
The hallway toward B always feels colder than the others at night. I don't know if it's the ventilation or the fact that most of the doors there have observation windows, like eyes watching you as you walk past. My boots were too loud on the linoleum. I forced myself to slow down, breathing through my nose, listening for anything over the soft hum of the building. The closer I got, the more the clinic's usual noises seemed to fade. No distant phone ringing, no murmur of a TV from the staff lounge, no wheels of a cart on tile. Just the low drone of air and the faint electronic beeping leaking through doors. The Ward B access door was locked, as always. I badged in, watching the light flick from red to green, the latch clicking open. On the panel just inside, a small screen listed room statuses. B09, OBS active, stable. No alarms, no alerts, nothing unusual.
If this story made you think twice about hospital nights, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notifications so you don't miss the next case. Tell me in the comments, would you trust a quiet doctor who only appears at 3 a.m.? Sleep if you can. I'll be waiting for you on the next night shift.